So what they discipuli and so what they omnes. Now that I got some more time, I'm going to start doing some lessons, some series, going off of Latin grammar, diving back into that, more etymology, all of which I do on my podcast as well. So if you need some help with Latin stuff, hit up my podcast. It's free content. And yeah, well, people tend to like to fall asleep to it apparently because my voice is soothing. So if you think my voice is soothing, I have some mythology episodes that have been entertaining and I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. I'm not going to do anything like this because I feel like it's cringe and I don't really want to listen to it after the fact. But I'll entertain like a sultry tone. Now, with that being said, we're going to get into some Latin grammar here. Check me out on YouTube too, because I'm going to put this video on both YouTube and TikTok. I'm going to start being more proactive in being putting those videos on both formats. Yeah. So, with that being said, when you get into Latin, you are kind of, you first encounter on the first declension a bunch of fancy dancy words: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative. Wow. Well, it's like diving into any other subject. You have terminology that you have to understand because these really are just fancy dancy words for really simple things, parts of speech, in fact. And then I forgot to mention our honorable mention the vocative, but the vocative is just direct address, and other than in the second declension, it's the same form as the nominative. So I won't get into the nuances and the irregularities of such. We're just going to get into the nitty gritty. That being said, because that's my ism, one of them at least, we have nominative. Looking here, nominative is just a fancy word that refers to the subject of the noun. In fact, nominative comes from the Latin word nomen, meaning name. So if you ever wanted to say, my name is, you would say, mihi nomen est, whomever you are. Mihi nomen est Liam, aka mihi nomen est Mr. Connerly. Genitive, however, genitive is just a fancy dancy word that refers to the possessive noun. Possessive noun? Well, how would I make a noun, just a typical noun? How about me, Mr. Connerly? How would I make myself show possession over something? Well, if I put a little ticky mark S after my Y in my name, that would in turn show possession, but then I would have to show possession over something, right? So, that being said, Mr. Connerly's green Eddie Bauer shirt. Shouting you out, Eddie Bauer. I'm still waiting. More than half my wardrobe, y'all. In fact, Eddie Bauer underneath here. Or what I could do is I could put an of the in front of Mr. Connerly, and I could in turn say the green flannel shirt of Mr. Connerly. Mr. Connerly's green flannel shirt, the green flannel shirt of Mr. Connerly. There you go. We'll get into these more so in another video down the pike. Dative, however, is the indirect object. Indirect object referring to, well, something that is benefited to or for whom in regards to the action, right? I know that that sounds a little bit vague, but when I say to or for, that is going to be my tried and true method on making any sort of noun an indirect object. That's what I tell my students. I like cut and dry rules. So if I'm ever at a loss, I'm like, how do I make Mr. Connerly into an indirect object? Well, I could say to or for Mr. Connerly, in which case my students are going to do their homework for Mr. Connerly, or they're going to do it for a good grade. See how the main action is that they're going to do the homework being the direct object, aka the accusative in this case. But why are they doing their homework? Well, in this case, they're benefiting from the fact that if they do their homework, they're going to get a good grade. Hopefully, if they did it well and they did it diligently and they read the directions. You guys remember me in directions, right? I miss you guys. I already miss you, and you guys haven't even been at school yet to see without me. But anyways, sad. Wham wham. Ablative is our last one here because I did go over accusative. Well, we can touch on that because a direct object. What is the tried and true method in seeing what a direct object is just in an English sentence? Well, I think it really typically comes after the verb. In passive sentences, it's a little bit different, but we're not going to talk about that. We'll talk about passive at some other point. However, direct object typically coming after the verb. The students do their homework. The students, subject, do verb, their homework. Direct object. What are they doing in this case? What's the direct object of the action that they're doing? Homework. And then for a good grade would be again that indirect object, to or for a good grade. Now, finally, we get our prepositional phrase, aka ablative here. Ablative referring to the prepositional phrase. In fact, if you actually etymologize preposition, pre means before, and position comes from positum in Latin, meaning having been placed. It's going to be that fourth principal part, that supine. So, having been placed before the phrase, essentially. And what is a preposition? It's what's placed before the object of the preposition. So, what do you have in this case? Think about a prepositional phrase. It's whatever the mouse can do to the box. It can go under the box, in the box, into the box. That's going to be an accusative preposition. We have prepositions tied with either a dynamic accusative or a static ablative. I'll get into that in another video. With that being said, hopefully you've learned something new. These are just all the fancy dancy words that you're going to encounter right when you get into Latin grammar. And I know that they kind of are like, well, why do we have these? But think about it. If you ever go into science, if you ever go into legalities, legal terminology, all of which you have to learn the language of the discipline. This is just the language of the discipline, and this is making it easy peasy lemon squeezy, plus the vocative, aka the direct address. And then you can whip out these fancy dancy terms in a cocktail party and be like, well, I guess you didn't know what the nominative subject is, but it just refers to, well, I just said it actually. So I'm going to shut up now. Hope you learned something new. Tempus est discedere.